Oh dear, we are in a mess. Down on the floor, on the roof, there's fairing compound on every single surface in here. And this weekend is not a long weekend, but it's going to be a weekend where I can just get in and hopefully do the first pass of the sanding. What's going on down in here?
I am sealing all the holes with plastic to stop the dust that's going to teem down into here from Ross sanding the saloon roof tomorrow from all the fairing compound that you can see on the roof. Now that's pretty much going to come off when he does the sanding.
We're doing the electrical compartments all sealed off. We don't want to seal it off entirely. We've still got a little bit of airflow to it, but we don't want any heat build up, and I've turned pretty much everything off. All the doors have got plastic on them, stop the dust from getting into them. We're not going to worry about the bathroom because I can do that again, but if you have a look at the roof, it is now fully covered in fairing compound and ready for its first sand. And the good thing is that I'll be able to get it done while there's no one around. It's going to be pretty much all day with the overhead sanding. I'll start off with an orbital to get all the rubbish off it, and then I'm going to move on to a flexi sander. Now this area from here forward all the way down to the end of the dinette module, which is here, is going to be covered in the Raptor 2-part urethane with a light texture because I quite like it. Well, Janet and I both quite like it. I've also done a lot of work up in here around the hatch recesses. They need to be sanded, and that'll be a detailed sanding job, but I'll get the bulk of the excess off. I've put about 6 kilos of fairing compound on here so far, and that pretty much is all going to end up down there and in our vacuum cleaner and out of here. But what hopefully will be left is a reasonably smooth surface. I've sanded it 3 or 4 times to get it smooth, but there's always going to be areas where there's weave coming through and the odd bit of reinforcement. For now, we're just sort of trying to block everything off all the way down into here. It certainly looks different. And over in that area over there, I'm pretty much going to have to start to commit to putting in this wall. Now that's going to create a lot of problems for me access-wise, so I need to make sure I know what the door sizes are in those hatches as well. There's a bit of green still left over here, and tomorrow morning when I come in, when I start sanding the other side, I'm going to build this up a little bit because it's not consistent thickness all the way through. It's just a little bit of a low spot here, so I'll build up a couple of layers with some cotton flock and vinyl ester on there, and hopefully we can keep the dust out of everything else. But yeah, it's a mess, but it does look startlingly different in here now. We've got a very, very nice bright surface, which will then be sort of half green and half white tomorrow by the time I finish sanding it. Janet's heading off to Sydney tomorrow. She's heading up to Palm Beach, up where Home and Away's filmed if you're in the UK, and they're going to be bringing, oh, not in the UK, but if you're in the UK and you're watching Home and Away, that's where Janet's going tomorrow to pick up JB41 with the team, and they're going to bring it back down to Sydney. It's up there doing some electrical work, sorting out its electrolysis issues. And Janet's, what's the swell supposed to be?
4 meters.
4 metre swell. Should be fun. A good 4 metre swell, and yeah, rebound off the Sydney cliffs is going to be interesting, and they'll do about 15-20 knots, come back down to Cronulla. So she's got a 12-hour day tomorrow. So I hope everybody else is having a nice weekend out on the boat. I'm out on the boat. Janet's going out on the boat tomorrow, and I'm out on the boat doing this, sanding that stinker for the next 2 days.
Quite exciting. I'm not choosing the soft finishing like the quilts or duvets or whatever you want to call them yet, covers. But I am starting to choose what the laminate we might use for some of the walls, the wardrobe doors, and also what we're thinking about for the floor.
So what are we thinking?
I'm thinking around here because that'll go with that Tasmanian ash.
It's like a Tasmanian ash, yeah, eucalypt, yep.
Or silky. I mean, I don't know that that's a maple, but they reckon, we were looking at Tasmanian oak, eucalypt, which is a lot lighter than this, and I think it's nearer to that.
Yeah, so that's good. That's sort of like we're getting to some finishing touches, hopefully some ideas about finishes now that we're starting to get to the fairing stage of the ceilings and the works. But yeah, that's looking pretty good. Some good choices there.
Those are out. That's out. These are in.
All right, chuck out what's out. Oh, there. So we're going for a yellow whitish sort of look.
I don't know. It's either that or over here. I kind of like that.
Janet's taken quite a liking to the Lightwave 46, which is an Australian-made boat. Beautiful, beautiful quality boat, and they have some pretty nice finishes, don't they?
Inside they do,
Yeah.
but it just has some similar layouts, and I just like the way they've done it.
Yeah, it's a really
simple
nice,
and clean and light coloured.
Yep.
Warm.
And we're very fortunate on our boat because we've got a lot of fiberglass modules, so we've got a lot of white, including the fridge cabinet here. You know, there's a lot of white going through this whole area here, including the galley and the kitchen and the module, and then you've got the bathroom. And wood accents is more the key for this boat. Easy to clean, nice and bright, nice and light, and we'll have some, you know, some timber accents around the boat just to break it up and obviously make a nice cleanable surface, and obviously try to reduce any sort of mold build up in the works. This whole roof here, as we mentioned, is going to be the Raptor coating, which is this light speckle. I wasn't keen on it to start with, but I'll tell you what, it's growing. I mean, I quite like it. It's not aggressive like I thought it was going to be. This was sprayed, obviously, and you've already seen that, but I'm happy with that texture. I think that's actually nice and mild, and would be really, really good on the inside of this. Oh no, the Flexi Sander, we borrowed this from our mate Darren. It's heavy, but it just does an amazing job. I've had the first pass with the DA, the dual action sander, so that sort of goes round, but it also goes in an angle. And I've got all the material off, and now I'm trying to get the fair. And it's heavy, and overhead it's not real pleasant, but it works a treat. I can put that straight back in the Q-cell bucket. Look at it.
Well, careful with it.
You vacuum it up and reuse it. It's looking good, eh? Feel it. Feel it, Jack. Feel it. Essential.
Yeah.
Good, eh? Cool. I was laying in bed about an hour ago wondering what the hell was I thinking when it came to fairing and sanding the roof of the cabin. My God, I got into a mess yesterday afternoon. Janet was here polishing up some of the gel coat that I'd sprayed on the fridge cabinet and around the outside of the portside cabin. And then she came over and started filming, and she said, what a job. That's possibly one of the worst jobs you could ever ask anyone to do. I got into it. I did about probably 20% of the cabin top. It took me about 3 hours to get it sanded down and start to do the initial fair. Now, this isn't going to be the complete fair. It's basically just to get down the bulk of the material. And I swear, when you put fairing compound down, you end up wasting 99% of it. It just gets down on the ground. You've got to vacuum it up and get rid of it. But today I've got a lot to do, so I'm in an absolute state here because I've just had to move everything out of the cabin because absolutely everything gets showered in fairing dust. You can see here the stark difference we've got where I've got the fairing compound on. Now, I put it on pretty thick because it wasn't that irregular, the surface, but it's irregular enough for me to think that if I spray and do the paint job, it's going to be a shocker. But over here you can see we've started to fair it down, and it is mottled, and I have now got a very, very fair surface here. There's going to be some irregularities, and that's purely in my laminating, and the only way to get rid of irregularities is to fill it with bog, and I don't want to carry too much of this fairing underneath my paint job. I really want to try and get it as smooth as I can and as little fairing material on there as possible. Let's do it. Went home on Saturday night after 2 days of fairing this roof. Oh man, aching. I've got an appointment with a remedial therapist this afternoon to try and get some muscle relaxation in my back. It's just killing me. Now, very important point. When you invite people around to have a look at your boat that know stuff, you should be prepared to cop it. And Darren, a friend of mine who's got a beautiful shining wilderness and built it himself, walked straight in and just his eye went straight to this spot here, and I can't say that I hadn't noticed it, but I thought I'll get away with it, but he simply pointed it out. It's not good enough, and it isn't good enough, but it's going to create a few days extra work. What I'm alluding to here is this sill for this window here is quite thin here, which I knew I need to build this up. When it gets to here, it actually curves back in about 5 millimeters. And if you look around all the other ones, they're all pretty true. They all look pretty nice and pretty true, but this little bugger here doesn't. So you've got a couple of choices. You can either bog the whole thing out and fill it out, and then it's not going to look right with all the other ones because we have a thickness of around about 8 millimeters here. Or I can kerf it down probably a couple of inches, maybe 50 mil, down to where the recess ends here. Now remembering that this is all going to be filled with a window and Sikaflex and whatever else, Fixtech or whatever I intend to use. But if I were to slice this down, I should be able to pull that back into line with a number of clamps and some steel straight edge. It's a horrible thought because if you look at it here, it's not straight, and that was in the mould, sadly, and moulds over time will give, and particularly because the one out the front there, I've started cutting it up. But if you look at it here, he's right. His comment was, that looks like shit. Which just crushed me, but I knew it was there. I just thought maybe I'll get away with it with paint, but you don't get away with these things. You either do the job right or you live with it for eternity, and I don't want to be sailed along thinking Darren thought that looked like shit, so I'm going to fix it. Now the best way is I'm going to slice it down intermittently and see if I can pull it back into place, get some epoxy into it and hold it, and then leave it for a few days to straighten itself out, and then I can come in and true ferret. It's only the sill of the window. It's not really a structural part, but I'm hoping I can bend that sill back. The actual outside is curved as well, but I can live with that because you won't notice it. Every time I walk down this companionway, I'm going to think Darren thought that looked like shit, so I'm going to fix it and stick it right up him. I've got 2 pieces of gal box section, RHS I guess you'd call it. Basically just going to clamp that together. I'm going to fill these with epoxy. I'm going to put some in a piping bag, pipe it in there, and then fill it with epoxy, and then I'm going to leave it for a couple of days and let it really cure out. And hopefully I'm just going to get rid of this little bow here. This is all it is. It's only from here to here. The outside is not an issue. It's actually just the sill, but it will make a big difference to how this looks. It'll actually take out that bow. It does physically. As I clamp this shut, it straightens it up. And then I've done this one over here as well. So this actually had a bit of a shallow spot in the actual raw glass. So this is raw fiberglass or solid glass, and it just needed to be filled out a little bit because it wasn't consistent with the rest of the thickness. Now what I've done is I've got a straight edge, wrapped it in plastic, filled it in between, and then I'll be able to fair that back to around the same edge. So I'm trying to get a consistent sort of thickness all the way around so that it looks the business when it's all painted up, and that's not going to take much to fix. All I have to do then is just give it a sand, put some fairing compound on, fair it back for 5 minutes, and that'll be done. So this area over here, I've straightened this up, but I'm then going to have to fill this. You can see how thin it is here. It's just an area where I probably, you know, I was probably in a hurry and I didn't really pay too much attention to it, but I'm going to fill this and get this all level with this thickness here, so that once this continues down, it's basically all one piece. And most importantly, there's a lot of dust around this area here, so give it a clean with acetone. This is just cotton flock, Cavasil and polyester resin, because the whole deck is essentially polyester. It's not vinyl. There's no reason for it. So I'll just pack this up with filler until I get to the desired thickness. And it's only really on the edge, because once it disappears down into this bevel here, or this chamfer here, we're really not going to see that thickness because it'll be fed in. So this is my second go at this. I didn't quite get the result I was after. I got probably about 5 millimeters of straightening, but I needed about 8 or 9, and it still looks a little bit off to the eye. So I'm going to try a slightly different technique, and that is to use a bit of a different clamping technique where I can sort of overextend it, and then hopefully when it relaxes back, it'll go back to where I want it to be, or a little bit closer. I was sort of content with it, but I wasn't happy. I've got a raised section here and a raised section here, and I'm going to sit this here, and then I'm going to pull this more towards it, right where it needs it, which is right here with another straight edge, but a smaller one. I'm going to try and fix this little bow here. That's the only part that's annoying me. This part here is perfect. It's this 3 to 5 millimeters here that needs to be sorted. You can see by using a shorter one here, I've been able to sort of get that a little bit further that way just by having a gap here. The other day I had this against this sill, and that created a few problems for me. Oh, I'm just having an absolutely crazy day. I'm going from one job to the next, and I've got the helm station wall in. That's glued in. I've redone the windowsill over there, the kerfing over there, and tortured it back into place. And I've thought, well, I've got a little bit of spare time, so I'll tackle a couple of jobs that I've been wanting to do for some time. One is the portside forward cabin has a shelf just on the side around about 930 or around about waist high. It's on the outboard side of the hull. So if you ever look down in here, and long ago I made a template for it, but I must have shifted the wardrobe wall. I must have moved this back in here because my template's no longer long enough. But yeah, I made this template for this shelf some time ago, and essentially it is 7 centimeters too short for the intended area here. It's basically, we've got a big robe here, we've also got another large robe up the front here, so all we need is a shelf here. I don't want to go doing too much fitting out here because quite frankly it's a very narrow cabin. The passageway in here is quite narrow because of the stairs down here on the bedside module. So what I did is I actually went out and I had some foam already cut. And I've just made this part outside, and I'll just show you me making that. Basically, it was simply a pretty simple way to do it. And I simply screwed 3 composite angle cleats to the wall here, got it all level, and all I need to do now is just apply some epoxy, glue it in place, come back tomorrow and I can tab it. Now that is actually dead level. This will have some type of finish on the top, potentially a just gel coat sheet. There's no point in fairing and painting something like this when I can make up a quick layer of gel coat, get a perfect finish, easy to clean, easy to wipe down. I can repair it at any time. I keep saying this about gel coat, it's wonderful. You can easily repair it. And then I'll put a nice timber or Tasmanian oak finish, sort of a fiddle on it, I guess, and that will also act as a handrail. In these bedrooms, when you come forward on a rough day, they're as rough as hell, and you're looking for something to grab hold of, and invariably there's nothing to grab hold of because the wardrobe's going to have a face on it, and you know, you just want something to hold on to. So I'm planning on putting a couple of handholds in here. Every cabin needs good handholds. We're seeing it in a lot of the boats where you go into them and you grab hold of a bit of lining on the wall and you tear it off the wall, so we don't want to do that. Essentially all of this is going to be a single layer on here painted, and then we'll have a nice white laminate or white gel coat wall on here to cover up all this foam and everything.